agenda item, we're going to defer that. And then we're going to move on to roll call.
Board of Trustees retreat, roll call, Chair Edgar Chase IV. Vice Chair Andrew Morris.
Present.
Secretary Treasurer G. Wade Newton. Board Member Giselle Johnson Banks. Board Member Charles Brown. Board Member Stephen Smith. Board Member Hunter Thomas.
Here.
We currently do not have a quorum.
So we're going to go ahead and proceed for information only. We anticipate at least 2 of our additional board members joining us so that we will have quorum. Because we do have items on the agenda that do require a quorum, but we are going to proceed with the information component, and that includes going back to the item that I deferred, the opening circle.
Okay. Thank everyone in attendance today. In terms of the opening circle, the purpose behind that is this is our annual board retreat. And normally we're able to do these in person. We haven't been able to do these in person for the past couple of years. So this is our first in-person board retreat since pre-COVID. So moving forward, we're going to reinstitute our retreat. And this time we brought in a formal facilitator. I'd like to introduce Dr. Albert Dupont, Tracks Method. He's already spent some time with the staff, and he's going to take the board through some exercises as well to help us continue to calibrate our strategic plan. And also just refine the vision, make sure we're all on the same page. The board's ideas are included as we make our budget, as we make our action plan, as we refine all of our operations on our annual cycle. So we're going to start off with a few exercises and then get into some presentations. But I'll turn it over to Albert so he can walk us through the retreat for the rest of the day.
Thank you, Mr. Burns. Good afternoon, trustees members. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. So, excuse me. So we're going to get started with taking a look at a couple of things that you have. And as Damon spoke to you about, I'm hoping to be able to bring to you and facilitate a conversation with you so that we can understand better what the board would like to see the staff work on over the next year and keep focused. So this is a good opportunity for Board of Trustees members to be able to give input into the workflow for next year as you think about your governance and accountability for the staff that you have here. So to get us started, we're actually going to go to your actually strategic plan itself. And the first thing, and I actually have it up here for you. If you can take a look at the next slide. There we go. Thank you. Take a moment to just read and reacclimate yourself to the values of the organization. If you can't read that, I've got a hard copy here for you if you need one as well. Naj has also got some extra copies for you if you rather. And this is on page 9 of the document that you have.
Thank you.
Thank you, Naj. Take another 15 seconds to read values. And we'll switch over to the mission and vision. Again, on page 8, you'll have the mission and vision of the organization. Again, just read it.
We have to miss lunch. We just got started.
Chairman Chase. Albert, pleasure. We're just reading the values and
Okay.
values and the mission and vision of the organization on page 89. So here's how we're gonna process this, and again, begin to take a look at the work, the great work that the board and the staff has already done. You have some blue sticky notes in front of you, and you have a black magic marker. This is an opportunity really for the board's voice to be heard in this, and the way this activity works, it's called a sailboat activity. And Mr. Thomas already noted my sailboat here by the water line, of course, because you can't tell the rest of it, but in the sailboat activity, what we're gonna do is really start off at the next slide. You'll see what this looks like. It's gonna look like this by the time we're finished. But to start off with this activity for our circle is that we're actually going to do the next slide, which is just look at what's working, the blue. So take your blue sticky notes, and you're gonna have about 3 or 4 minutes to do this. And here's kind of like the basic directions. Think about what's working right now with.
Hey, what do you mean?
Okay. Who was it? Okay, so think about the strategic plan, think about what's been working, think about it from a point of view of the board, the staff, the community, New Orleans as a whole, politically, social, economically, and just take a look at everything from a bigger standpoint, really at bird's eye, 30,000 board view of what's been working. Now, every time you write an idea, there needs to be able to be read, so make it legible, and 1 idea per sticky note. You want as many sticky notes as possible. But again, thinking about your perspective as a board member, what are all the great things that are happening? 1 idea per sticky note, and write as many as you can in about 3 minutes. That'll be our opening, and we're going to share those out as a group. Questions from the board? Again, 1 idea per sticky note. You have 3 minutes. Naj, you can help me with the timer.
Sure.
And 1 idea per sticky note, and write as many as you can in 3 minutes about the great stuff happening regarding the strategic plan.
I see we're at 3:06.
And by the way, board, the staff also did this about 6 weeks ago. So we also have their data that we can share with you. But let's go ahead and start off with you. And the way we're going to share is that we're going to take it, and again, putting it above this water line, is we're going to actually share out and work with the group and just tell us your idea and put it up here. So it's an opportunity for us to celebrate, but also to take a look at the great work that you've been doing. So who would like to begin? Vice Chair Morris, would you like to come up? And I can help you put them up too
Oh,
if you
sure.
want to, or
Yeah, stand
Sheriff,
up,
you
all
want to
the
stand,
things.
move
Oh,
around?
Lord, okay.
Probably gonna cover all of mine, so I can throw them away.
Thank you, thank you. All right, so one thing that's working is identifying potential opportunities, additional funding opportunities, staff reconnecting with community after COVID, finances providing clear and concise info, staff deepening relationships with other public partners like the city and Nora and Hano, and multifamily financing has been well received by developers.
Excellent, thank you very much. So let's give her a little prop there. Thank you. Chair Chase.
One thing I had was what we had in front of us is creating a clear strategic vision.
Yeah.
And the rest is more so looking outwards, right? I've talked about the federal infrastructure bill that recently passed. That's an opportunity for us. Talked about building the foundation for the policies that we want to implement. Some of them started like the developer pipeline, the green home mortgage piece. Green Bank is starting to gain some traction and we were ahead of that. So I think that's a huge opportunity. With movement as I guess on a national level to more green infrastructure. So there's been probably delves into both of those, but that's a little different. And this one is more so, it creates an opportunity for us to help. And I talked about the affordable housing needs in the city. So that definitely creates the demand and the opportunity of where we can see focus, how we can help.
Thank you, Chairman. Trustee Thomas.
I think mine is gonna be a little redundant.
That's fine. We love, that means it's a good celebration then.
Absolutely.
We have plenty of room here for you.
So, I agree on the green, do I keep it on this side? or do I-
Either way. Yep, as long as
Green
it's above the water
infrastructure,
line.
I believe in that. So great minds think alike. Well-versed leadership, I think our leadership is in position to do things and I trust them.
A lot of great things happening. Get us started, right?
I don't get no claps.
Yeah, let's get some more. That's right. Thank you for reminding me.
Innovation.
Thank you for your reminding me. Absolutely, for both you and the chairman. So we're gonna go ahead and start to kind of take a break for this for a second. And if you go back one slide, Naj, we're gonna come back and talk about things below the water line that are affecting us. And so it's gonna start looking like this in a little bit. So we're about to go through 3 presentations right now. One is we have Victor coming to speak to us about the market right now that's happening. And then we're going to talk about the infrastructure bill. And then we're going to talk about what's been happening with the strategic plan with Mr. Burns. So as you do, think about the things that might be below the water line, things that are hindering us both politically, socioeconomically, funding wise, et cetera. Because what we're going to do is think about what activities and resources and partners we're going to need to make this happen. So as you listen to the next hour or so, hour and a half of information, really start to link it to what does the board wish us to move on? What are the priorities and who, what, and what things need to be done in order to make these priorities happen for you? Make sense? It's kind of a preview of the next couple of hours together. And I'm going to turn this over now to Victor, and I'll let Mr. Burns do his part there. That's how that's all.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, great. I will share my screen.
It's not crystal clear, but I can see them.
Okay, and everyone can see this now?
Sure.
Perfect. All right, can I get a volunteer to read the disclosure?
Not over
Okay, so I'd like to just talk about, Damien invited me to talk about the market. And so I'm going to give a broad overview. Some of these slides have a lot of information on them. And actually, because we are starting late, I actually have another call in 15 minutes, so we may have to pause and revisit after I'm available. But I'll try to cover this stuff on a high level, and then but I will have to jump in about 15 minutes. So, as you all know, the main theme of the market in general has been inflation. And so in the can you see my mouse cursor?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So the dark green line here is the yield on the 10-year US Treasury. This spike here is SIFMA, which is 7-day municipal yields. So this is basically the height of COVID crisis from the financial market point of view in March of 2020. And then since then, and then the Fed came in and did severe quantitative easing and injected a whole lot of liquidity into the market. So the Fed funds rate and SIFMA were close to zero for a long time. And then you can see the steep hikes beginning earlier this year. So now Fed funds, the rate is about a 3.08. And the 10-year US Treasury has been increasing steadily as well, as has this dark blue line over here, which is 10-year MMD. MMD stands for the Municipal Market Data. It's a tax-exempt, 10-year tax-exempt paper, AAA paper. So down here is basically the US Treasury yield curve. So you can see the yield curve is actually inverted. So the yield on the 10-year US Treasury is at right under 4% as of last Thursday, while up, 1, 2, 3-year Treasuries are close to 4.5%. This is a sign that a recession may be coming. Typically, not always, but typically, an inverted yield curve will precede a recession. Yield goes back up to 20-year yields and then drops again for 30-year yields. And then MMD is down here. MMD is never MMD is never inverted, but you can see it's much lower than the yield on the U.S. Treasuries. And then this black line would be a mortgage revenue bond. So if FNO were to issue bonds supported by housing, this is kind of where the yields would be on a year-by-year basis. So why don't we just skip to this slide. And so in this slide, what I'd like to just go and show you is, this will focus on this dark line here, which is a bond yield for a tax-exempt mortgage revenue bond. Throughout 2020, it was very, very low, but since then it shot up in 2022, very volatile, up and down, and now it's about a 462. So quite high compared to where we have been historically. And then on this slide, we have, if I'll shift a little bit to the TBA market. So what I have been talking about was the bond market. Now this is the TBA market, and this is where FNO has had an active, or has tried to have an active program selling mortgages directly to the secondary market. Well, you'll notice is that the dark lines here, the dark shaded orange line and the dark purple line, this is kind of where MBS rates, MBS pricing has been. And basically, if the MBS coupon is anywhere from 2% through 5.5%, you're basically SOL, because here's the prices. If you were to try to sell a mortgage-backed security at 5.5%, which means the mortgage rate would be somewhere around 6%, you wouldn't even be to sell it at par. You'd be at like a little over 98% in the Fannie market, Fannie and Freddie. And then in the government market, you would still be below par. So what this means, and you can see, the more dotted and faded the line, the higher the pricing. So this was like a year ago, 6 months ago, 1 month ago, and basically the prices have just gotten worse and worse and worse, which means that the TBA market is in just really, really not effective in being able to finance mortgages. So housing issuers across the country are facing this challenge right now. What that means is that mortgage revenue bonds are quite competitive. So if you look, these lines represent mortgage rates over time. And so the greater the spread between the orange TBA line and the black MRB line, the greater the benefit of MRBs. So right now, you would be able to finance basically a 7% mortgage rate in the TBA market, and you could finance the exact same mortgage using mortgage revenue bonds at a 588. So mortgage rates should be vastly competitive by issuing mortgage revenue bonds rather than in the TBA market. You'll notice that in 2020 and 2021, the opposite was true. TBA generated a lower mortgage rate, and that has definitely changed. And if you look at a government insurance product with down payment assistance, you'll see a very similar difference here. And then this is on the conventional side, you'll see the same benefit of mortgage revenue bonds over TBA. So this, again, is good news for housing bond issuers. Bonds are much more efficient than the TBA market. So why don't we take a closer look at what a single family bond issue would look like. So in this example, we are financing $15 million of MBSs, and the product we chose to show would be a 7 points of down payment assistance for each of those MBSs. So you're trying to finance $15 million of MBSs and about $1 million of down payment assistance. Cost of issuance would be about $275,000, and then you have additional $190,000 of costs, negative arbitrage and lag in mortgage payments. And then the other upfront costs are compensating the lenders for their origination, but then you receive about $130,000 from the master servicer. So all in all, we have about 16.6 million of uses. This would be financed with bond principal totaling 15.6 million of bond principal. We estimate bond premium in this market could be about $400,000 for a total of 16 million of bond proceeds. And here's the big problem here is that leaves a gap of about 619,000 of FNO contribution that is needed for down payment assistance, and also to fund some of these other costs. So that basically, down here we've outlined is just our highlighted two key issues. One is upfront contribution for down payment assistance and cost of issuance. Now this $619,000 can be recouped, but with bonds, it takes a long time for that to be recouped, 4, 5, 6, 7 years for that to be recouped. So to the extent that FNO is able to secure other funding as well, whether it's from the city or whether it's from a nonprofit or a foundation, anything that could help bring your contribution down would help. Number one, help your bottom line, and number two, if let's say you were comfortable, investing this $619,000, which you wouldn't get back for a number of years, then additional money could be used to bolster this DPA amount, which could be used for green infrastructure, blue infrastructure, resilience measures. So this could be a more attractive product. Now that brings me to the second issue, which would be marketing. You know, FNO has to be able to really get the product in front of people and popular in the market. And so, you know, you have some third parties that should be able to help you with that, such as Stiefel, who's your current turnkey provider. But, you know, but not necessarily, you know, but if we're doing bonds, they may not be as excited to market. So marketing is always a challenge. And then with that in mind, you have to keep in mind that LHC is always, you know, out there with their own products. Currently, they offer a 4% down payment assistance that is forgiven after 3 years. So, you know, your down payment assistance, you may not want to have be forgivable. You may want to try to build up a pot of revolving fund. Basically, whenever the people sell or refinance their house, they have to pay back that down payment assistance, and then you can leverage that money and lend it back out again, rather than having it be forgiven. So a lot of HFAs are doing variations of different types of revolving DPA funds or forgivable DPA funds. So I'll pause right there. I've got about 5 minutes left, but you know, I guess that the key takeaways are that bonds are very efficient compared to the TBA market for financing single family loans, but you know, we've highlighted two of the biggest issues facing FNO in the current market.
Thank you, Victor. I'll add one more key issue to the presentation, which is housing supply. Housing supply and getting people qualified. So we sell these bonds, we got to be able to move it. We got to know for sure that there are people and homes for people to buy. People qualify and people homes to buy. So that's also a key issue.
Yeah, I mean, I was just talking to a couple of our lender partners the other day, and apparently the voucher program is moving along quite nicely. You know, they're doing like 5 to 6 a month, you know, which is, you know, that's not this kind of volume, but I think it proves that there is still movement out there.
Handle voucher.
Handle voucher homes closing 4 to 5 a month. I mean, those are some of the hardest loans that you're gonna see out there. It's a small, and again, some of them are going sideways. It's what ends up happening. What the lenders are telling me is that the folks who are struggling are CDC partners, because so much of the cost that they have to put into their houses. So you've got voucher holders going out there buying on the private market, directly from you know, owners, with real estate agents, obviously, but not CDCs who have invested public money into building a house, and having to recoup, you know, the house might be selling for $250,000. They got subsidy in it to get it to work for the voucher holder. Whereas what they're finding out there, that there's still a market out for houses more in the $125,000 to $175,000 range, that are in the open market without all the bells and whistles. It meets HQS inspection, but and they're moving. So there's, yeah, I mean, I think that's who we've got to start talking about, is can we cultivate those, and also maybe even with the green mortgage product, making some of those houses even stronger, right? You know, if that could be you could get them to a house that's comparable to what the CDCs are building, but it takes time. It's not just the first, you don't, because again, where insurance is, and I think that's I know that's what the CDCs are having problems with, is insurance. You know, it's a $300,000 house, you might be selling it for somebody whose the mortgage is right, $175,000, $200,000. You still put $300,000 into the house. So the insurance is gonna be like, what is it gonna take to replace that? And yeah, they're gonna do replacement costs, they're not gonna go to value for where construction is right now. There used to be a nice gap, right, between the value of a house and the replacement costs, especially in neighborhoods that were gentrifying. Insurance companies were saying, yeah, we know the house is listed for $350, but the replacement cost is $225, and we're not gonna insure it for more than $225, which would give the owner a little breathing room. And especially if the gap wasn't being financed by the bank, because then the bank doesn't care either. But if replacement costs are still really close to that, then it's a $300,000 house. You got insurance for $300,000, which is making a lot of the low to moderate income folks, they can't buy, and they're getting stuck. So it's just figuring out what's out there. And then do we have the capital to do what we need to do for this?
So Victor, to jump, y'all have any questions for Victor?
Victor, you mentioned the recapture was, not recapture, we get our investment back.
Right.
And am I reading this right? Is that also, is that 4% a projected quote unquote profit or return on investment?
Yeah, no, so the return on the investment here, well, let me see. So when you should be able to earn full spread on this product. So the present value of full spread is about 4%.
Sure.
And so, yeah, I think that for every dollar of, and that would be on the bonds. So you'd be able to earn 4% on this bond principal.
Gotcha. Okay. And so that's, yeah, that's not nothing. So yeah, so it is, and we make we make our investment back. I mean, we make our contribution, we get our contribution back plus 4%.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
correct.
So, so there's, but that will all, it all takes it's a slow, steady investment. And it's a good place to be, but to your point, Damon, is if the market's not there, who are we doing this for? Okay, that's the only question I have.
And Victor, you said you can come back, right? You have some time a little later?
Yeah, I just requested that other meeting be moved 15 minutes. So let's see if we can cover the rest of this.
Perfect. Thank you.
So and I'll provide this presentation so you can look at it a little closer. And we just have an example of a cost of issuance here and an example of a mortgage draw schedule, $15 million over the next 12 months. Okay, so then on multifamily, the trend is still increasing interest rates over the past year. One thing that is interesting is that you'll see that the dynamics have changed. So in the past, this orange, the light purple line, which is 40-year FFB or Federal Financing Bank rates, used to be super low. This is something where you need FHA risk sharing insurance in place to be able to take advantage of it. Then it became one of the most expensive products, and now it's again one of the least expensive products. So you can just see that over time, while interest rates in general have gone up, it helps to, risk sharing is all that much more valuable now. And then the benefit of doing a 40-year product with a 17-year balloon, has changed over time, but still provides, 25 basis points of benefit here. So, it just helps to be flexible in the multifamily space and to have, risk sharing insurance, again, is worthwhile. But, as we, similar to the single family side, let's just run through the sources and uses. So the uses, everyone knows are many acquisition, construction, rehab, development costs, reserves, capitalized interest, and there's a deferred developer fee typically to help get everything together. The sources would be equity from selling low-income housing tax credits, bond proceeds, developer fee deferral, and soft second loans. And then, over time, right, administering those pilots helps their cash flow and helps issue more bond proceeds because pilots allow a greater debt service coverage ratio. But really, the key issue again is gap financing or soft second loans. So a lot of the loans that you have in your pipeline can't be built because acquisition and construction costs have just skyrocketed, and so those gaps are just tremendous for a lot of developers. And again, this is not unique to New Orleans or developers there, but there's a lot of so a lot of states are able to find soft second money and help close the gaps for a lot of developments, something that is much harder to do for you all. But to the extent that, again, you are able to secure any money from the city or from maybe a nonprofit or something like that, that can move some loans through the pipeline and close that gap. And then looking down a little further down the road, if we can pool several projects together and get them to the bond market at the same time, that could, you would have some economies of scale in terms of spreading the fixed cost of issuance over a few different developments. And so, potentially reducing a little bit the gap financing needed. But if you have, a certain number of projects that could be pooled together that are close in timing, and that could, you could actually get potentially interest from the city or from a nonprofit if you've got a bigger need rather than a smaller need. So that may be something that could be attractive to do. So that actually is my last slide. And I'll pause here for any other questions.
Talking about the supply, what we talked about for single family, how does that change in multifamily, what we're seeing? It's a different shift, I would think.
That's a great question. So the difference there is that in multifamily, the developer and owner are one and the same, typically one and the same, whereas in single family, the developers are looking for buyers.
Right.
So there's an extra chain in the supply link that needs to be figured out. And so the other issue is that you see that the low-income housing tax credits, the equity for this project, there's a lot of equity out there for multifamily, but relatively no equity out there for single family.
Right.
So developers are just more attracted to doing multifamily deals because that's where the capital is. And if you notice, this is different than a market rate real estate deal where you have more incentives built in, you have less skin in the game from the developer because their skin in the game comes from bringing all those resources together, getting the land, getting some of the other resources. So this is Victor mentioned pooling deals. This is a good way to also help DBE developers get to the bond market because they're all out marketing their individual bond issues. And it's really complicated for them to break through doors at the banks. The banks are the ones that are buying individual bond deals at a local level. So it's just a lot easier if the bond issue is coming from us. And we're supporting 5 to 10 deals at one time. Those banks are going to be more inclined to buy. We can get economies of scale. We can get risk reduction from pooling. So there's just a variety of things that we can do on multifamily that don't exist on single.
Right.
Any other thoughts for Victor? The feedback on what I just shared, Victor, about the smaller developers?
Sorry, say that again, Damon.
I was just asking if there was any feedback on what I shared about the differences between single family and multifamily development and helping the smaller developers get to the bottom.
Yeah, I don't have too much to add. I mean, I think that what you're trying to accomplish with trying to get DBE developers, into a financing without having to profit share, that's a great idea. So hopefully we can get that product off the ground.
Quick question, and Damon, you can probably answer it if that's it. I know they had a slide that showed, the movement of the bond rates versus other markets and this, that, and other. How long does a issuance normally take, and how fast or volatile is one of those graphs you had on there? I mean, the timing, I think, is key in some of these issues, right?
Yeah, so this, this year has been quite challenging in that interest rates just kept on going up and up and up. So the first answer is that I think that to get a bond issue to market, a single family bond issue to market would probably take about 3 months.
Okay.
But so that's the kind of bad news. The kind of good news is that in this market, if you issued bonds and you were able to lock in your cost of funds, and then you make your mortgage loans after you lock in your cost of funds, you're making mortgage loans in a much higher interest rate environment, right? So you're able to lock in a relatively low cost of funds and make mortgages at in a high interest rate environment, and then you can have a very attractive product. Now the opposite would be true if you issued bonds here and then you're trying to move your mortgages in a decreasing interest rate environment. That could be difficult. So, but right now all signs are still pointing towards increasing interest rates, at least until the middle of next year, when I think people are thinking that there will be a recession, and then towards the end of next year, there are some banks that are predicting that we will be in a recession and the Fed will have to decrease the Fed funds rate. But increases are still on the board for the next 3-4 FOMC meetings. I will thank you all for the opportunity to present, and I'm sorry I could not make it in person this time.
So, thank you.
All right, Damon, I'm sure we'll catch up soon.
Yeah, I'll
Bye,
talk to you.
everyone.
Thank you. So that brings us to the next item on the agenda, which is a presentation. It reads here, a presentation about the Inflation Reduction Act. We weren't able to get the Green Bank on for this particular meeting. There's some transition going on at the Green Bank Consortium. We just brought it in the executive direction. It's actually formerly the leader of the DC Green Bank. So this guy started up the DC Green Bank. Now he's going to help organize all the green banks across the country. So we'll get him to join us in future meetings. I do want to share a few notes about the Inflation Reduction Act, and I can share some more detail with you. In short, the Inflation Reduction Act that was passed back in August has about $369 billion of energy and climate spending, and it's intended to spur growth of the green ecosystem, the green economy. And that 369 is going to come in a variety of ways. Some come in the form of direct incentives, such as tax credits for purchasing clean vehicles, grants for affordable housing, home energy upgrade rebates. And then there's also direct support for clean energy production and manufacturing. So what that is the 27 billion that we've been going after for the last few years as a green bank, along with the other green banks. There's also money for grants. There's also funding in there for renewable energy tax credits. So the renewable energy tax credits have been on threat to go away for a number of years. But this act, this Inflation Reduction Act, actually expands it for, I think, another 10 years or so. And basically it's supposed to help the market clean energy explode. And the reason being is that there's just going to be more equity available for these projects. More importantly for us, as a quasi-governmental agency, we can now take advantage of those tax credits, which we couldn't do before. So the Inflation Reduction Act specifically outlines abilities for agencies like ours, the green banks, to match muni bonds with renewable energy tax credits. kind of like Victor just walked through what a single family deal, what a multifamily deal looks like. Well, on the infrastructure side, it's gonna look a lot like that multifamily deal, where it has some tax credits in there, it has some other incentive money built in, the bond money. And that's gonna be a new deal type. It's gonna start hitting the market, so that's a big opportunity for us. A lot of the pipeline work that we're doing is preparing us to take advantage of some of these incentives. And lastly, it's investment in decarbonization of the economy. And I misspoke, the 27 billion is actually in this particular bucket. So there's 20 billion set aside for green banks. And I had a chance to sit with the other green banks a few weeks ago in DC, and we talked about our application to the EPA. We talked about what needs to happen for the industry to grow. And I can report that we're not as far behind as we might think behind the other agencies. Everybody's started brand new. Even the larger state level green banks, they're still trying to figure out their business models. And some of them have capital that they haven't even really figured out how to deploy. So some of us are looking for capital to match our pipelines, and others have the capital and trying to build the pipeline. So it's a new industry, and there's just going to be a lot of chaos for a while until a model is figured out. But we're part of that beginning phase, and that's a big return for us, big risk and big return for us in the long run. So there's another 7 billion that is directly available to state governments, local governments. So we can both go after both pools of money. So we're developing a strategy going into next year that will help us go after all of this at once. We can't really focus on just one, because as we've learned in the past, these things are shifting. And there's a lot of competition for it. Everybody wants in on this money. And by the way, 40% of the $20 billion pool for green banks has to be spent in disadvantaged communities. So New Orleans is typically, based on HUD standards, we're a disadvantaged community. So, you know, we should be able to access different layers of this money, because we fit the mold of everything that this plan talks about.
And what's the timeline to get dollars, like under the best case scenario and the worst case scenario?
So this funding has to be spent, I'm looking for the exact date, but I believe it's September of 24. This funding has to be spent by then. So the idea was for 180 days from the date that President Biden signed the act, but the EPA would be ready to start deploying funds. So
Where are they with that? 90?
we're at about 90 days right now. So we're halfway there.
So when you're there next week, hopefully they'll be like, okay, y'all gotta get ready.
Yeah, and that's what we were doing in DC, was putting together a package. So we're gonna submit jointly with all the other.
It has to be spent or obligated by the Pacific. That's very short.
The EPA has to spend it. Yeah, they have to get the money.
drop.
Not us.
Yeah,
They have to
but
spend
that, I mean, that's helpful because, you know, it's kind of, if it takes 2 years to get here. And we get, I'm not that we can't, we don't have to rush it out the door, but they have to get it
out.
Yeah.
So yeah, we got a 2 year window. Get our piece of the pie.
And have they made any changes to who can qualify as a green bank? Have they broadened it at all? Have you seen any people who might have been waiting in the wings and say, okay, flip the switch and submit the paperwork?
That was a big part of the conversation in DC, which is what does green bank actually mean?
Right.
Because technically, the funding is supposed to be for green banks or green authorities like us, CDFIs, Black-owned banks, other types of specialty funds, nonprofits. So it's not, the definition of green bank is probably going to evolve over the next 5 to 10 years or so. But right now, it sounds like the EPA is going to entertain proposals from multiple group types. So the green bank is one group. CDFIs are applying. I heard foundations are applying as well. So it's probably going to get dispersed out a few different ways.
And so we could be in different pots, right?
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, we might want to put together a New Orleans pot.
Right, so we can do for example, green bank pot, but then at 7 billion, we can go after it with RTA, school board, Sewage and Water Board. We all have joint projects.
Or on the cross.
Yeah, but exactly, a whole consortium
Yeah,
of
let's do a couple.
of
If we
local
can, yeah.
agencies.
Yeah,
And we go after our own pipe, we gotta have a pipeline, which we've been developing,
yeah.
and that will be the next step. So there's some organization we gotta do internally to figure out how we wanna attack the problem, because we also at the same time have to set up our infrastructure to be prepared to receive this funding and disperse it out. There's some white label solutions that we may be able to use from other green banks around the country to get us started quicker than normal. So we're gonna explore all those things going into. Any other questions about Inflation Reduction Act? If not, then we're up on a 10-minute break. So we can take a 10-minute break and then we'll come back and jump into a strategic plan review presentation. And I'll just set the stage for the conversation that Alva's going to lead us through, and we'll get back to the sailboat activity and some other exercises that he has planned for us. So we can take 10 or we can take 5, whatever, however y'all want to do it. But that's where we are. Keep powering through.
I'm fine.
Yeah, I'm good.
It's 3:50 and orange stop, so we might want to skip this first.
That's fine, and I can abbreviate my presentation. You've seen it a few times. So, Naj, can you pull up my presentation, please?
Sure, you sent it to me.
No, that's it.
I got it.
I was having trouble sending, but I think that, I think
I
you
got
got it.
it.
Huh?
I got it.
You got it? Okay.
Punch over there.
Yeah.
Oh, you do, oh, okay. Because the last time
Legacy.
remember last time I had to do.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, no.
we all have dinner tonight.
Oh,
I figure.
I gotta work.
I got you. I'm like, okay, that's all.
No, go back to the-
Friday, Saturday, I'm getting ready to do Thursday.
Oh, yeah, I was there Friday for some people out of town. They were, you want to join the dinner, we want to do this. I'm like, we don't want to. And I walked in there, I thought, yes, I mean, it was packed in there. I thought it was gonna be like, they had, gone out of, we did buy out the room. We were in the, yellow room.
Okay.
And so I thought it might have been that, but when I walked in there, I mean, y'all was packed.
Yeah.
Yeah, y'all was packed. I was like, good luck. Yeah, I mean, it was-
Which is good. They just got
It was-
staff.
Yeah, but we did do pretty good out there. One problem we had was, the table I was at, the guy ordered a Hennessy. Took 3 cups.
It's coming. I need to know.
Well, yeah, no, but both, first time it had Coke in it
Right.
and ice. Second time it had, still had ice, it came the second time with ice.
Right.
And then it came the third time
That was
fresh.
straight up.
Yeah, and then somebody asked, then somebody brought another drink with ice. And then he's like, no, I'm fine.
Nah, yeah, give me the actual,
But then with,
not,
I mean.
not this plan, but the one
take a
I
long
sent you.
time.
You just, okay, I only have one.
Yeah.
It's the first one you got up here.
Yeah.
So I think I thought that
But
was.
we were even from last year. And so he was like,
No, you say I already have it up there?
Yeah, this is it right here.
It's not like I have- Sure it is.
Thank you.
Right.
They're like, oh, you got tomatoes in the gumbo.
Are y'all ready?
That's,
Okay, so I'll jump right in. What I'm gonna do now is just give you a quick overview and for the community, a quick overview of our strategic plan. I'm gonna do this over and over again so y'all seen it in y'all sleep. So we can all understand it and breathe it. Next slide, please. Next slide. So the foundation for our strategic plan is the Resilient New Orleans Finance Plan, which we just talked about a moment ago of doing a group submission. So we have a formal plan that we developed with the city and all of the sub-agencies, RTA, HANO, NORA, School Board, Sewage and Water Board, the airport. They were all a part of a collective plan that we developed for giving us a guidepost on how to develop resilient infrastructure, or green infrastructure in New Orleans. That's significant because a lot of communities do not have that. And I know these reports pile up at government agencies sometimes, but you know, they are what you make them. So we're working to operationalize it and make it real. And applying collectively to the IRA money is a way for us to make it real. We have a strategy built into the document, but this is the foundation for all of the work that we'll do in our community moving forward. So the key areas are renewable energy, green buildings, clean transportation, water management, and nature-based solutions. And you can see our green finance framework, which is a way for us to work collectively and in a coordinated fashion across agency. So climate action, sustainability, green economic development, and social equity, making sure that all those things are always a part of the conversation. Next slide. And we develop our own strategic vision internally for Finance New Orleans based off that Resilient New Orleans plan. So we want to see a resilient New Orleans with opportunity for all. Next slide. And we created 4 strategic vision goals, using climate resilience to physically transform New Orleans, creating economic opportunities, such as helping DVE developers get into the market, helping first-time home buyers, building public wealth for community reinvestment. Victor talked about that return on investment when we go to the bond market. That's important so that we can recycle that money internally, create some public wealth so that we can have a stable infrastructure, a stable platform for developers and companies to come and do projects on. And then lastly, grow as an agile and innovative organization. So that means doing some of the things that we're doing right now, being wise about how we're spending the capital, thinking creatively about how we can implement new programming, using traditional HFA programming or traditional infrastructure programming. So these are all the ways that we have to think moving forward to be agile and innovative. Next slide. We have 3 core service areas. We had them broken out into 4, but the more we get into it, we realize it's best being done as 3 areas. So sustainable home ownership, sustainable development, and resilient infrastructure and innovation. Next slide. And our business model is very similar to the way it's always been. We take those 3 areas and we offer mortgages, we offer housing bonds, tax exemptions, other public incentives, credit enhancements, development support, and we work with a variety of capital providers, muni bond investors, impact investors, foundations, local banks, CDFIs, and that capital is sold to investors all across the country, and believe it or not, all across the world. So you have international investors that want to buy U.S. municipal papers, U.S. municipal bonds. So the audience for our bonds is expanding outward and inward. And what I mean by inward is the technologies available now allows us to start offering our bonds to the local community or making sure they're involved in the process and get a piece of that action too. Next slide. The impacts we want to see are more affordable housing, sustainable housing production, green job creation, stormwater mitigation, community action, green tech deployment, and a reduction in CO2 emissions. We're looking for deals where we can get all these things done at once. It doesn't always happen that way, but we designed it to where we want to see multiple impacts happening on the ground at once. So getting a good return is cool, and even building some wealth for the developers and the companies, that's great too. But the community wants to know, how does this benefit them? Every time we go out and talk to the community, and I know y'all are doing it in your own capacities, they want to know where it's at. What I need to see it. And I hear y'all have great vision and all those things, but where is it? We need to see it. So we're getting closer, but these are the impacts we want to see coming out of the projects that y'all have been approving. Next slide. And here's our goal. We want to get to $1 billion of community investment in the next 10 to 15 years. We're going to continuously update this goal over time. This is going to be a living, breathing number. Projected by the end of this year, we have supported upwards, and this includes the value of the pilot contracts. We're still trying to figure out how this is going to be reflected in our audit, our pilot contracts, but taking the construction value of those pilot contracts, that's a $100 million investment. And if you look at the total development cost, it's over $173 million that we've helped support. And then I'll come off our balance sheet. We play a role in helping get that investment in the community. So it's a good start. But there are many, many other projects in the pipeline that we have to get done in order for us to get to that $1 billion mark. Not just the housing, but infrastructure as well. So all this funding we're going after is going to be necessary to help us scale up that high. And it can be done. it absolutely can be done. We got the pipeline to prove it. It's just about execution and having the resources to do it. Next slide. One more, please. Here's some things that we accomplished this year. We closed our 6th pilot for a total of 572 housing units. This is cumulative since 2020, but that's a total of 173 million in development costs for the community. Again, a great start. Finance New Orleans has done a little bit of multifamily over the years, but this is our first time having a formalized program, just like we've had in single family. So it's a good start, but there are many other things that we can do to grow it and make it more impactful. We also have a pipeline of $750 million worth of projects for multifamily and infrastructure. Some are real, some are going to fall off. That's the process of the pipeline, but there's a universe of opportunity out there that we're keeping track of. We also received a $150,000 grant from Heron Foundation. We received a commitment of $600,000 from the city, and we also announced a $25 million community impact bond that Victor alluded to earlier, which is we'll be able to get back into the market with a single family issue, a multifamily issue, maybe both within the next 12 to 18 months. And those both can be titled impact bonds, depending on how we structure it. But everything we do is impact in New Orleans. I mentioned already, the whole community is considered distressed in HUD terms. So that means we have an advantage, and we're going through some innovation processes right now to figure out how we want this bond issue to look. So it's interesting process, but we are making some good progress and getting some good people to the table to help us get to the next level. Next slide. We want to accomplish a number of items over the next 12 to 18 months, including we want to close a multifamily credit enhancement deal. That could be in the form of pool financing. We want to issue our first multifamily bonds, our first set of bonds through that new CEA. We've only done pilots so far. Y'all have approved the bond deal, but it's one of the worst markets to bring a multifamily deal because of insurance, construction costs, et cetera. And then also, we'd like to add sales tax exemptions to our toolkit. And then we have a CEA with the city of New Orleans to formalize the Resilient New Orleans Finance Plan that we just talked about. This was supposed to happen before and during COVID, but we're going to have to catch up. And so each agency is signing on to a standard agreement. But we're going to have one directly with the city that empowers us to be the city's green bank, and also empowers us in the same way that they did on the housing side. So we'll have 2 CEAs with the city, both that have revenue potential attached to it. And then we can also do pilots for infrastructure deals as well, meaning someone wants to come in and do a community solar farm privately on the land. So that's going to have a tax value that's going to go up and take advantage of pilots, especially if it's benefiting a distressed community. So we also want to close our first green infrastructure demo project. Part of the agreement with the city is that they're contributing some projects to us for us to look at and test out our financing platform. There's a $2.5 million of grants that we're going after from foundations. There's a $10 million ARPA request on the table with the city. And right now our request is being reviewed, so we'll see where we land. And then we're targeting $50 million from the National Green Bank or the IRA, and then the $25 million in impact bonds that I mentioned a moment. Next slide. For a little bit further view into the future, the next 18 to 36 months, we want to relaunch the single family bond program, and we may be able to shift that forward based on what we just heard from Victor. Key is we got to have some funding to put on the table to make that work. There's a housing ecosystem master plan being developed with the city, housing authority, redevelopment authority, and finance New Orleans. So we're going to have an actual plan, just like the Resilient New Orleans Finance Plan, that outlines how we're going to work together and how we're going to build housing long term in the city. We'd like to renovate and reopen the Barone office. We're looking at a number of options there. Earning investment grade rating from the credit rating agency. So the 3 core service areas, each one will have its own rating. And then we could even have our own rating as an organization. So something that we have our eye on. We started talking to the rating agencies, but we're a little early for that process, and we have to do more groundwork related to what Victor was talking about. And then over the next 3 to 5 years, we're looking at reaching a level of 400 mortgages, single-family mortgages annually. That can come from bond issues, that can come from TBA. So we have to be creative about how we get to that number, but that number is magical because that's what Finance New Orleans used to do in the past. On an annual basis, Finance New Orleans was consistently popping out 350, 400 mortgages a year for first-time home buyers. And keep in mind that we've expanded beyond first-time home buyers, and we can deal with existing homeowners. So we think that 400 number is relevant. It's going to look a little different than it did in the past. But by expanding it, we were able to keep it around 400. Also, we want to do at least 5 multifamily deals a year. The market is suggesting to us that in a good year, we can get upwards of 10 deals, 7 to 10 deals. And if we're able to pool and have a consistent process of pooling deals, that will set us up for long-term success, because as that portfolio builds, it creates more spread, which creates more stability for us as an organization. Also, we want to get to the point where we're doing 3 green infrastructure deals, targeting revenue of 10 billion, assets of 500 million, and hitting and continue on track for our $1 billion of total community investment. So I know we're going to focus more on the short run, but I wanted to give you some view into the future of where we want to go, to give you some insight on what we need to do today in order to achieve those goals.
And I guess the question I have on long-term goals. So we know like what our competitive advantages and who our competitors are around doing the multifamily bond issues and those type things, so that we can make sure that we are catching in on our competitive advantage, and that we're reaching those goals long term.
Developers generally have 2 options, or they use 2 avenues to go to the bond market: LHC, or they're going to do it through us. Now they can pick another agency. The city can do it if they wanted to, but the 2 agencies that have the infrastructure set up to do this are LHC and Finance New Orleans. So LHC is interested in issuing the bonds when they put up the soft money. We don't have our own pool of soft money, which is what that ARPA funding could be, and some of the other dollars. We could have our own soft funding to go along with our pool. That's what will make us more competitive over the long run. Otherwise, we'll get a few conduit deals here and there, but we need to have a little more to offer to make ourselves more competitive.
But also too, I mean, the thing about it is that the state isn't as interested in New Orleans state deals anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
You
I
know,
think that, but
Yeah, so they want to spread it everywhere, and they don't want to, the opportunity for multifamily at scale is only in a couple of places, and they don't like acknowledging that fact. And we'll see how the new leadership is, because previous leadership was very, very into this performative, let's play keep away with New Orleans, even if it didn't make financial sense, because again, there's not a lot of places you can put this money. And so the developers have kind of been redirecting and things like that. And so FNO has been, a lot of the deals that Dan and his team has been working with, those could have been deals that the Louisiana Housing Authority could have figured out how to do if they weren't. Yeah.
yes, I'm not asking the question for us to defend our position. I just wanted to think about,
How you make it stronger.
Yeah.
No, like,
how we make it stronger. And then thinking about the new leadership and other agencies and what their plans for growth.
right, because they're not always gonna,
Correct.
they are the biggest bull in the play yard. If the numbers that work best here, they're gonna come back around. They do that with all of their other projects. They do it to like the CDC, the small CDCs. Hey, we got $200,000 about to expire. Y'all want to take it? Like, we haven't given you money for a year, but we're gonna give you this money that's sitting on the vine. They still do that, and they'll push in, and those CDCs will drop what they're doing. They will get to go after that money. And so what you're talking about is making sure that our partners go, no, we got it. We was random.
That's right. So,
There are a few things that are important in that process, which is having those soft dollars. And then one thing I think I kind of breezed over it, but we're applying to FHA for risk sharing. You heard Victor mention risk sharing in his presentation. Right now, we're not approved to be a risk share lender, but a lot of our counterparts around the country are. The reason why we're not approved yet is because we need to have a history, a track record. So the CEA we have with the city allows us to now say, we have a track record, we've started to do some deals, we're ready to make our own application. So we have had a conversation with the FHA. They've given us the information we need to apply. There's actually a window of a couple of years where risk share won't be available unless it's extended. So we have to really do this quickly. And once we have risk share, what that means is we can offer the best or the lowest cost financing in the market. So there's no lower cost financing with FHA,
Right.
federal, US Treasury, federal government based lenders. So we'll be able to offer that through our platform. Right now, we don't have it. So if a developer comes to us, they have to come to the table with their investment. Or they have to have some kind of HUD backing. Freddie Mac has an option, which we'll do alongside the FHA. But that's something that we have to dedicate resources to over the next 12 months. It's usually like a 12, 18 months in some cases. We've asked how we can fast track it. So we're trying to do a 9 to 12 month process where we get FHA set up. So you'll have FHA risk share deals, and then you'll have maybe 1 or 2 pooled financings a year, and that'll be our multifamily platform. So it gives different options. So the smaller the DBE developers, they may be better candidates for our pool. We may have our own soft dollars attached to it, but then the FHA risk share is just there for the community. Any developer that is ready, like the bond deal that you approved earlier this year, Christopher Park, that's an ideal type project for FHA risk share. 200 units, $35 million bond issue. That's the kind of deal we want for FHA risk share versus 5 million, 10 million, which are impactful, but those are a whole lot harder to market because they're smaller. So it benefits when you pool them, and it just adds a lot more value when all of those developers are DB. So we have a few different methods for keeping multifamily. Any other questions for me? So I'll turn it over to Albert to take us through some more exercises, and what he's going to do is help us build off where we want to go, what our vision is, and I see Giselle looking at the board. I think you want to do the exercises.
Thank you, Trustee Banks, pleasure to meet you. So that was a lot of information. I don't know about you, my brain is a little fried right now, so we need some processing time. So here's how we're gonna process this. We're gonna use the pink sticky notes now, the black markers again, 1 idea per sticky note again. And this time you need to write it in such a way that you're not gonna share. People are gonna read it, so it's gotta be self-contained. Unlike these, we did share, these we're not going to share, but they're gonna have to be self-contained or kind of self-sufficient so that people can read them and understand what you're saying. And here's how we're gonna take a look at this now, and this is what it's gonna begin to look like. What might hold us back? Think about it from again, a political, financial, social implication approach as to what are the weaknesses that are there? What are the opportunities we might be having? What are the threats? For those of you that know SWOT analysis, right? This is kind of like a mini SWOT. And you're going to think about 1 idea per sticky note, and you're going to take about 4 minutes to write as many things that might hold us back from fulfilling upon that whole mission and vision that we just talked about. Between what Damon shared, between what Victor shared, between the market, between all these great conversations and questions, what's going to hold us back? Okay, 4 minutes to go. Now I'm just going to take care of our 4 timer, and we can begin now.
You want to do that now, man? Okay, yeah, just for the record, we do have a forum, for today's meeting.
Okay. Take a look at your stickies again. Make sure it's clear from the point of view of the reader. So if it's a single word, I see one, for example, timing. Timing of what? What does it mean, timing? Or if you have one word, just make sure that you, again, it's going to stand on its own. So if there's something you need to clarify, go ahead and write it down. And as soon as you do that, come up and just randomly place your pink sticky notes below the water line. Random, that way people won't really notice your handwriting. Everyone has equal value. And just come up and place them up there. And then you can actually stay there and bring your red dots with you when you come up. Have some little bitty red dots. So that was multiple instructions. Pink sheets up there randomly, red dots with you, stay up there.
They're gonna know my handwriting, buddy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
There's only 4 of us.
Exactly.
We can't do a whole lot about this.
It's kind of like pin the tail on the donkey,
Yeah.
you're gonna spin around and.
Yeah, it's like, what?
And as you put them up there, begin to read them and just see what other people have written. If there's a similarity, you can overlap them. If you see something like, oh, that's the same thing I said, just pick it up and overlap it. Don't stress over it. Just pick it up and overlap it. So for example, I see one here, community awareness and community engagement. That's almost like a chunk right there. And I'll tell you what to do. No, you can overlap them. Just put them together. If you see anything like that, and I'll tell you what to do with the red dots. So make sure to read each one of them.
Yeah, that's right.
Even if it's somebody else's.
Yeah, just read everybody's up there.
This sounds like overlap.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is all kind of important, right? So you want to take 3 of the red dots. You can choose yours. You can choose somebody else's. You could choose all 3 dots on one because it's so important, or you could put 3 dots on 3 different ones. Take 3 dots and just put them wherever you think is the most important place for staff to work or start working on.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just go ahead and vote. So vote dotting or energy dotting. Just 3. And again, you can vote all on the same one. You can vote on different ones. Doesn't matter. Vote on yours, vote on others.
Well, that's good.
That's about to,
Yeah,
yeah,
well,
those
you
might
said it's
overlap that.
That's what-
Yeah, that's all right, yeah. All of us put
All of
this
us put that.
It's all of that, so.
Yes.
As you place your 3 dots, this is good. I'll kind of read them out to you. Yeah. Okay, so here's what we got here. So I'm just looking at the dots and the voting. So we have 4, actually, all 4 of you talked about financial position isn't capitalized adequately to meet the needs that can be addressed. And so that's a major one. Liquid cash to deal with the fund issues, right? The fund deals, operating deficit, et cetera. So that's a huge one for the staff. To think about, there's a 3 voter here, which is the political presence. Newly elected council members really taking care of that. House economic development or not. Priorities. Priority of the voters and of the politicians, it sounds like, right? And so our elected officials. So, and then there's a couple here on community engagement. We talked about the marketing, that part, which is important, which we've already know is an issue. And then
And those
take a
might
look at-
actually go together really well, is to know what community wants and also be able to talk to community about why this is important.
That is so perfect.
So
So
put it
as
in
you
with the
think about
priorities,
these,
yeah.
and Vice Chair, you're absolutely right on target with the next activity, so you're perfect. Because we're gonna take these now, and as the Vice Chair is saying, start to think about this, and this is how we're gonna do this exercise. So we have all this information, we've got this great work that you just did. And what I would like to do is place Vice Chair Morris and Trustee Thomas with Mr. Badger. And we're gonna come here, and we already have a recorder for you, so you don't have to worry about that. So if the 3 of you can come around here, and then I think Elizabeth, you'll record here. And then Naj is gonna be recording for this group, and with this group, can I have Chairman Chase and Trustee Banks with Mr. Burns here? And I'll give you the next direction of what to do with this, because Vice Chair was leading us right into the great exercise now. And then Naj is gonna record with you guys on this end. So here's what we want to do. Given all of this, we really want to empower the staff, Damon and his team, to think strategically at the 30,000 view. Because you, as a matter of fact, I think Vice Chair Morris, you said it beautifully. You were meeting with constituents recently and you learned some things about what's happening. That's exactly what this exercise is meant to do, is really help the team, help from your point of view as board members, think about what are the key activities they need to be focused on? What are the key resources they need to be focused on? and a few of the key partners that we need to bring to the table. So from your lens as board members, what are the things you want the staff to really focus on regarding activities, resources, and partners that maybe they've done, maybe they haven't done, maybe these are new people, maybe these are different ideas, but you're bringing all your collective knowledge as board members to the staff so that then they can take this and create a more refined action plan from what Damon showed earlier with his strategic plan, right? So it helps them break it down into more specifics in terms of what you want. So this is a great opportunity for the trustees to actually sit down and say, okay, staff, here's what we need you to focus on because these are the big directions that we see is moving in the market, and these are our best thinking right now. And then out of this, we're going to actually take these notes, and then Mr. Burns and I are going to actually meet and think about how to present this back to you in terms of the work that you want to do. And again, Naj can report for you guys, for you. Elizabeth will be reporting there. They're just staff to report for you. And then we have the chief operating officer and chief executive officer to help out answer questions. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. We'll have about 10 minutes with this activity and then we'll share out.
Exactly, but I put around.
Let me throw out a few things.
The lack of prioritization, right? That's how marketing and engagement is how you address that. But it's unless you've done, it can't just be a
Service areas,
even an ad, even a sophisticated ad, an expensive ad campaign, unless it's
sustainable homeownership,
the piece.
sustainable development.
You need one. I also think that they would need.
It says the high level too.
Real analysis. How people say.
It's the high level.
They're happy, like what's our home? Our policy makers, the focus groups, things like that. We- I think we need some research. To talk about that.
One reason.
We talk about the style of crime. What people care about.
Yeah, and I know that it's not a problem.
So, you know, people care about
I got high level.
condition of their employment.
One of
So
the
why are we saying that why are elected officials, why are policymakers getting away with not prioritizing our city? What is the disconnect?
I'll say for the city,
I feel like this is better what you're saying. It's good.
at the city hall or. Without it. So I guess maybe marketing or business.
Call it community engagement.
And I think that's the messaging development is, once you know.
What are you saying?
Not community, I'm talking about key.
You're talking about a market analysis?
Then that also tells you what you should be doing and then how to talk about it.
Partners.
So message about it.
Maybe, I guess,
So
one
maybe-
time.
And in the community, and then working with, not just.
What we mean by community engagement,
We typically do,
all of the
so talk, everybody will start with like,
all the
lots of
stakeholders,
needs
and
and
then all
help
the
are really,
So when I'm talking
you
about.
have a great meeting,
the folks
right?
who
You get a
are
bunch of people show up, and then it doesn't translate into action. So that means that maybe you have to do some real professional research.
Prioritize.
Going, folks who know how
Yeah.
to
That's right. That's
break down
So
That's right. And I'm
what
totally
people
there.
are thinking.
Right.
Yeah.
And what are their, what is their limitation?
So aligning
Because
with
I suspect for most of the people, because they've seen this stuff.
any more
time and
key
time again.
activities?
So
Not that they're not interested, they don't believe that this iteration is different,
investor relations.
right? And so that means that you're fighting against past failure, fighting
You said
against past
investor
betrayals.
relations?
So you've got to get in there and
And
dig
then
at
there's
that.
also,
It's psychological, it's emotional.
Hold on, before we go
Build
back to
trust
investment
in a
relations.
way that isn't really fair,
Okay.
but
investor
you gotta do
relations.
it. And you get, that's what's happening, but what I see happening, that's why I mentioned systemic barriers.
For the
But
buyer
also often the people
FNO bond.
inside of public agencies, they can start blaming, well, they don't want this, they're not smart enough to
And
get
then what
it.
about
And
I know we have
that's why,
our
and it's
pipeline,
like, and then,
Perfect segue.
that's our notes for program development.
that's right.
And
The pipeline.
one
Now,
example,
see, when we- it's like,
that's in special spec. Do you have a booth of that's in special?
So, yeah,
So this is a little
yeah,
different.
and a market
The
analysis
program development
about
is working with.
what does that mean? Like, where do they want to go? Where are they going? And then what happens? They're at Essence.
Adding all
Do
that.
they have money to do
No,
this?
that's for agriculture.
Do they have to, well, and I mean, again, like, there's also a lot of people at Essence, people working in Essence, right? There's the people who are visiting
A
us.
lot of times people come
And
to us.
so you need to have.
I hear two things.
Financing,
Yeah.
how do you keep that
I
going?
hear one is
Shop.
market analysis, which nobody think of market analysis, I think of billions of dollars. and-
Yes.
and those kind of other key activities. But I also heard you say financial analysis.
Correct.
Like understand who the customer is
The
and
financial
really,
management of.
what's the right word? Was it?
Well, would that be key?
Custom avatar, directly, you know, that avatar,
Which
yeah,
include,
customer journey.
Yes, exactly.
Really map out the customer journey.
And-
Helps to decide on marketing.
And that's stuff that has to be done by professionals. Yes, and that's stuff that all has to be done by professionals. Like, you know, like, it doesn't, it's not against the staff, or anything like that.
It's a whole skill set.
It's a skill set.
People actually do that
It's a
work.
very
Right, so
specific
key
skill set.
activity.
And honestly, the people who can do that, y'all don't want to be around anyway, because you're gonna spend a lot of money on one person who's gonna
I'm
do.
gonna come back.
You might, it might work 3 months out of each. That's what consultants say.
These are the psychometricians, so smart people that know how to go out.
That's right. That's right. And it might take them a year to do that.
Yeah.
But if, you know, but if you do it and then they come back every couple of years, or things like that. But it's not capacity that y'all need to develop. It's a real relationship.
And I think that's something we just try to carry. Just, you know, put
Yeah,
together
like,
and just
yeah,
something-
Jarvis was supposed to do some of that.
So technology.
Gino Inc., they have some really interesting data, actually, as well as UNO's real estate.
Yeah, about data center.
The data center, not so much, we're the ones doing most of the housing right now, but the data center really economic development. Gino Inc.
So somebody has to do all of
It's Gino Inc., it's not an all.
Sorry.
And then, I mean, you put a housing over, you don't have to pay us for it.
This is highly represented.
So we have a lot of data and the data,
And then
center.
this
They're gonna
is-
have the economic development, particularly broken down. by
So the capital.
For key resources.
In the city, I mean, we can see some of that. in the city.
Yeah, and, you know, the master
So would y'all
data,
consider?
that Michelle Thompson's been working on for years. Also, if she's talking to these people where they are, talking with where people are spending their money.
Something like that.
Um,
Intergovernmental agreement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and that's something less than- You know, I mean, I'm so mad about that. The last part data thing is, it could be so much more. It's a typical top, well, it's a typical top down, but we want to help you. And we want to, and it's a great idea, that we want to give you the debit card data about what people are spending on to where you live and where you're spending your money. Right, I mean, like, but then when you get into it, they're like, oh, we can't do this, we can't do this, we can't do this, we can't do that.
It's like, I'll tell the story.
Except to tell us how MasterCard helps.
That's a good list.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're gonna find schools on the finance piece. I think this is important, we can figure out what the financial products are.
LED is actually, that's what was funding the soft section program. to get to the council.
I didn't feel qualified to answer the question. That's something that you should know. But I believe it's something that should be clear for anyone to review. You know, however it's explained, however. Very clear, very elementary. this is what we provide, this is how you can take
I
it.
mean, honestly, there's a second fact to the population that doesn't even know Fano.
Right,
We are not Fano.
right,
Everybody knows about Fano, even if you don't live in public housing, everybody knows about Fano.
right,
Most
Yeah,
people kind of know about Nora,
right.
you know, we have so much light. That is wrongly always, oh, you want to tell a blighted house, you need to go talk to them. And
Yeah, I found myself explaining a lot.
Right.
Doing
yeah, and that's, yeah, so we need, people need to understand, yeah, people need to be clear about
I know you
this.
have, you have
We
one.
already doing it.
Have we-
We want to know.
And also, yeah, so if we don't have the right products for them, I mean, that's the thing, we become.
Yeah, like I'm
Yeah.
thinking.
Some billboards.
It's
On a
like
bus, you know?
maybe a quarterly brief, like one pager, it says here's what we've done so far, maybe.
I would say developers in general, but then these contracts.
You could use it for talking points too. So what are those key things that we might need on that dashboard? So that-
And we also may need to be talking about our partners, like, we gotta go old school like the banks. You know, the banks give you money, how many banks, I mean, I know we're not doing a lot of them.
Developers.
But anyway, but the banks, you do a partnership with them, and they make you put all the collateral all over your place. Like, you don't see the reverse, you know, the loan officer will sit there and say, look at the person and say, oh, you know what, I want to see you in Fano. And that might be the first time somebody even hears about Fano, and it's still not really clear to them. Right, because we're still dealing with that loan officer, you know, it's still, there needs to be something more there, but the banks are saying, you know, like, I mean, even if it's Carl Fano partner in there.
They do have one page.
But you're giving it to somebody who got funded by a house and they got a stack of documents.
Yeah, it's just confusing.
Like, they may sit and read all of it, but again, you're giving them, they're giving them stacks of documents. It's.
Maybe if there's something maybe on the front, on the button on their website or
Yeah,
something.
I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's, the analysis will also help. Like, it could be us sponsoring something, you know, not spending too much money on that kind of stuff, but, you know, like, we don't need to be the official partner of the Saints or anything like that, but there might be something
So
like
there's
that.
also a resource. for you
That we
to
could
learn.
use.
I think we're working on some-
They do it with them, and by the
Instead
way.
of having.
Yeah,
Independent
exactly,
roles.
that's my point too, yeah, I would want it reinforced by Linden Partners, but it's gotta be a complement to the larger strategy that we're driving, that is about our community presence.
I always do that to them, like.
I never want to
And then we also
underestimate.
want to be.
Especially
Yeah, that's right.
when I can touch it, when I can feel it, when I can go against and see that it goes, when I can see.
Okay,
it.
this is how we're gonna do this little transition right now.
Heritage Festival,
Yeah, I
like
think
you
it's
mentioned,
easy.
I mean, you mentioned. Booth.
As you come back at your group, I would love to go back to the pink, read it
There's a
again,
lot of low.
see what's maybe missing and add to.
Some.
So come back to the pink, see what's missing and add to.
Not just with buy a table
Right,
at a fairfield down,
right.
but that we are. Gonna be there.
I know my opinion.
Yeah. I was thinking of the kids with the recreation playground.
I think that'd be great too.
Yeah.
Was waiting to like be more interested in people with children.
Yeah.
Get on target all. of them.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so it's. But I think,
Yeah, I don't know if that covers that piece of program development. side.
need the customers. What moves them?
I
And then
know.
look at the opportunities, next messaging, because, you know, we spend a lot of money
Some
on,
capacity.
you know, websites, all that stuff like that. I think it looks great.
And then
And
we
I
have
bet
that
you say
fundraising.
that sometimes people think that this was changes. And what you do is you end up talking to yourself. And the people who already know you notice it, but it doesn't get to people. I know I didn't really work with that.
Work the team, man.
Okay, take a look at the pink. Did you get everything you wanted?
Yeah, we said, I mean, we
We're about to do a
folded,
share out.
we folded those together.
Okay.
You know, like I.
Yeah, that's fine.
Um,
Engagement goes part of that, right?
Yeah, how to make. Our work prioritized. That's my first time seeing that.
Okay, so let's go ahead and share, and we're gonna ask one person from each group to share the conversation that you've had. You've only have, I say one person from each, one of the trustees from each group to share with the other trustees your thinking. And so trustee Morris or Thomas, which one would you, who would like to share? She got it?
That's what that feels like to be voluntold?
That's what it looks and feels like.
I do it so much. So we focused on the community engagement piece and the community partnership, as well as dealing with the barriers that lead to our work not being prioritized at a political or policymaker level. And so we talked about, you know, marketing and engagement, getting clarity around the products that we have and their needs and who they're meeting, you know, getting a customer journey roadmap, everything from getting one pages together, and really just dealing with the fact that most people do not know what Finance New Orleans is. That we're not Nora, we're not Hano. That's not a bad thing not to be Hano, but Hano is known by, if you live in New Orleans, you know the Housing Authority. Most people don't know the Finance Authority. So, and what that means is that also makes it easier to marginalize the good work that's done here. Politically, there's not a risk if someone doesn't come through on a commitment that they made to the Finance Authority, if so facto, City of New Orleans. And making sure it's connected to the work. So we also talk about key resources to do some of this, some real research, to talk about people's needs, to talk about what moves people to call a council member and to say, you know, why didn't you vote to give, why isn't FNO in the budget? You know, why didn't they get the money that you told them that they were going to be getting? And also, why do those same council members ask questions like, what is FNO doing? Without like, why don't you know? Like, you know, what, because it's not singing for them, even though there is progress, it's not being messaged in a way that people can hear. So doing some real analysis to figure out what it is people want to hear and what will move them, and then getting them together, and then talking about there's other places we can get some of that data, like GNO Inc. will have some of the particular around economic development and real estate, their analysis, making sure that that stuff is always being folded in so that the team has access to it. You know, the Housing Node provides data, the data center does data, the city, and also like driving some data initiatives, like what's going on with MasterCard, the data work that they're trying to do. They should be talking to the FNO staff about this. They'll end up with NOLA VA and things like that. FNO should absolutely be at those conversations. And also just figuring out how, once we get all that together, we also get some professional help on not rebranding, but outreach and education and saturation, right? I made the joke, not sponsoring the Saints. We don't have to be the lending partner of the Saints, but there's a lot in between that. Like Hunter mentioned, like talking about Essence Fest or French Quarter Fest, and not just buying a ticket to a black tie event, but being out there when the people are out there, so that they go, well, this is what y'all do? Oh, okay, I need that, or my cousin needs that. And really thinking about a grassroots piece. Once we know how to talk to people in a way that like really resonates for them. So we focused on that because we knew y'all were gonna have to.
And I think the other part too, I think, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Trustee Thomas, is there anything missing from
No,
what you
no,
would like
I'm
to
in
share?
total agreement. I think it's very important, especially in a city like New Orleans, to get out there and meet people, population, ensure that people understand and know what you bring to the table and become comfortable with you. I think name recognition probably plays as much of a role as the services that you provide as anything else. So I just think it's important that people have us on the front of their mind when they go to these events that we have within the board, that they see a table, see a booth, explaining to people, because I think that's where people engage, that's where people learn, especially in this city. I know we have the social media area and everybody wants to kind of lean on that more often than not. But I know for me, it resonates when I speak to people, when I see, I touch, and I feel people. And that's for anything, any product that you're providing. If I can speak to you and you can relay the message to me personally, and it sticks with you, as opposed to something on social media, going to your website or something. So
It's
I'm
impersonal, right? Yeah. Byron, is there anything from that conversation that may have been missed for the greater good? Did we hit it all?
I think everything's been covered.
There was one thing I want to say, Vice Chair, I did pick up that you said, is that consider that some of this may not be within the necessarily the purview of the staff, but maybe consulting out to get this information pulled together. Because the staff may or may not have the skill set to do psychometrics and data analysis and all that other stuff. So I just wanted to point that out as something I caught in the conversation.
That's right.
Any questions for this group? You did well. Thank you very much. Yay, good job. So snaps for you. Okay, so trustee Banks or Chair Chase, who would like to present?
You wanna go for it?
And I'll move this over. How about that?
That's a lady thing. That's what we do.
But it doesn't matter.
All right.
We can tag team you start out, Father.
All right, so we talked about, the key activities that we talked about, that FNO needs to focus on is, program development. We have a lot down here, y'all. I like that y'all kind of focus in a couple of areas, we got everything. All right, so we talked about program development, actual, nuts and bolts of how we deliver, the programs that, David talked about. And so we know that we have to, do a lot of work there. Which lends us to the key resources that we need, trained and qualified staff to be able to do that. And that was kind of in line with, I think, an overlap on the pink notes that we had. Fundraising, going out, so we know we need capital as a key resource. We talked about going out and fundraising. That is a huge priority for us to do some of the work that we are trying to do. Government relations, right? So in terms of newly elected, council and mayor, administration. How do we make sure that the city and other partners in government are aligned with our vision and making sure that they're holding up their ends of the bargains that they, what they said they would do. So in terms of us creating, intergovernmental agreements, so that putting them in writing, right? The CEAs that we're working with the city. Damon talked about having a CEA that was started, I think, pre-COVID. That still isn't assigned yet. So making sure that we push those things to the finish line.
Yeah, and business development, that's we talk about the developer pipeline. Same with getting out there and developing those relationships on with developers that see our common vision. Financial management as in terms of when we sell those bonds or go to the bond market and get that, somebody has to oversee that. Technology, we were talking about nowadays, applications, loans, whatever have you, is now you can start that process online versus going into a bank or coming in here or wherever, and developing that type of technology. But the beautiful thing I like about both of them is y'all focused on getting out there marketing and really the personal aspect of it, which is needed, because this drives this, and they both are needed. So it's you have to touch on both aspects. You have to drive the demand from the common person and me and everybody else in the street to talk to the developers in the city to say you have to see this unified vision. And this will help that, right? Like you talked about, this will help push the politics. When you get people on the street saying, we know family, we know they're trying to address this affordable issue or whatever the issue is, let's work with them to create these different policies and programs to see it through. So I think together, I mean, they're really cohesive, both of them, they rely upon each other.
Mr. Burns, anything to add to that group that you may have picked up?
I think the trustees that were part of this group just kind of honed in on the idea that we need to have on the ground relations, but the decision-making relations too, the people that have the authority, like the city, the mayor, I'm sorry, the governor's office, different transportation departments, consortiums of developers, where we have to spend time cultivating those networks too, in order to drive the work. So I think the thing that stands out is that we have a stakeholder universe that just has to be nurtured in a variety of ways. And we need to be responsive with our internal infrastructure programs, technology we use, how we manage the money, how we underwrite deals. All those things will be informed by those key partners.
Excellent job. So trustees, with everything in your head right now that you've learned today, spoke about today, all the thinking you do about this, all your meetings that you attend over this, is there anything big that we missed in this conversation that did not get pulled forward that the staff needs to consider? We've done a lot of, kind of unpacking, starting here, right? The things that are working, the things holding us back. We did a little bit more. Is there something that you're sitting with or thinking about that really is kind of missing from this conversation that we need to talk about?
So we kind of talked about it in our group, and it's just, and Damon touched on it in our key partners. Some of the areas that we have not traditionally cultivated those relationships around the governor's office and state relationships. And then one thing in particular we talked about was the transportation sector, reaching out to the Secretary of Transportation. A lot of money coming down for infrastructure and roads to Louisiana. That's a space that we have not normally played in, that there may be a seat at the table there for us.
Good example.
And I think that kind of stuff too connects to the work on the ground, because they've also got to understand that Stano is really representing New Orleans.
Mhm.
It's not just we're coming with our begging bowl.
Yeah.
Because that's why it's where they, oh yeah, you could sit in, and then if there's something left over, we'll give you something. Because as opposed to
The FNO is New Orleans. Whenever they go,
that's
whenever
right,
Damon's going to Baton Rouge,
that's right,
he's speaking on behalf of New Orleans as
that's right,
well,
that's right, that's right.
which we had talked about as well too, in
Yeah.
terms of trying to get to Baton Rouge as much as possible. Okay, we're good? Gives them direction. Now, what we're gonna do with this is that tomorrow morning, Damon, Byron, and I are gonna take these notes, I'm gonna type them up, and then make sure that Damon's plan of action that he shared with you today is aligned. I'm hearing direct alignment. So is there anything that may be missing from Damon's conversations earlier that we want to just highlight right now? Is there anything else that we need to think about tomorrow as we start putting this stuff on paper for you?
So as we talk about resources and we talk about where we need consultants, and we also need to talk about where staff, So that is not, it's one of the pink pieces. All of this requires scaffolding and, a group of professionals who are properly supported.
A little star, just so that we make sure to highlight that. Okay, that is the end of this formal session. You can see, this is great work, by the way.
Quick question,
Yes, sir, I'm sorry.
and
Excuse me.
forgive my ignorance on this. Do we have a social media presence?
Mhm.
We do, and how often are we posting?
This is irregular. It's not as aggressive as we could be with it.
Okay.
So that's something that we gotta address.
And how often are we letting people know the accomplishments of that?
You know,
I think it's only being heard through the.
So just to connect this group's work with that Chairman Thomas brought up is that, thinking about maybe a quarterly, a biannual newsletter update, something of a one pager, two pager. It doesn't have to be complex,
But not
Um,
just to do it, because
Right.
everybody can do that.
Yep.
Like, that's why I think the analytic information.
and
is
it's gonna
important.
have a purpose to it, right?
What do people want to know? And what will actually get people's attention? Because, social media isn't easy. And unless we're going, Doug and Hunter going, boil up and throw down. We're
Straight to the gun.
y'all get violent told for that, we're not.
Speaking of that, though.
That is not going, that's going to get the people's attention, but we don't have anything, we don't have anything else like that.
That's why they want to see it.
One thing, talking about marketing and getting attention, and some banks do it when they are part of a project. Like I pass, if I'm coming from Cisco and I pass, what's the Earhart Development CDW is doing with
Yeah,
the Grove.
do we do that?
Mhm.
Okay, we
They
do that
got
on our.
CDW, they got the Grove. Do we have a thing we can put on their ride fence?
Yeah, we don't have enough, that's something that we do.
But
Yeah,
just
like,
thinking
but
of
a
something
big
like
old-
on some of those projects, it could just be one or two and we move it.
Right,
But
but
we pop
like
it
a
right
big
next
wrap
to,
too.
oh, cause that's right.
Yeah,
So
because
that's
IDB
What
makes
I'm
it-
hearing is some type of communications marketing plan has to be
Yeah.
developed
Yeah.
regarding all of this, right?
Yeah.
But Chairman Moore, Vice Chair Morris, based upon the data.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Using the data to kind of.
We can do some
this.
easy stuff
Yep.
right now, just to get it moving, and that's,
Okay,
when I've done these kinds of message testings before, it's always helpful when you bring them in to have things that you tried, and then you can say, this is what happened,
Yeah.
right, when we did this. And I think like the IDB, for example, they make their developers pay for signs, very expensive signs that highlight the industrial development board's investment. And I'm not suggesting we do, because they make them put who's all the board members and everything like that on it. But making them drape a section of fence with Finance New Orleans on it is a small thing to have them do. And it would immediately just, Finance New Orleans, okay, what's that?
Yeah.
so something like that. So definitely we have that down for, that's just, I'm knowing Damon's participation with the board, he's gonna bring back to you the communication plan, but it sounds like what we need is some kind of marketing communications plan
Yeah,
to come together and to be able to implement some of these
yeah,
things.
and I
Okay.
mean, some of it will take it will take a minute to do some of this analysis.
Yeah,
Things,
yeah,
like
yeah.
I said, I think there's things that.
It's not
staff-
tomorrow,
Yeah.
right? 6 to 12 months from now, maybe.
Right, but the
Okay.
staff can implement some things right now, like just
Yeah.
that would be a newsletter, something really simple, and some other signage and things like that, and then get to do the hard work of really figuring out where the people in New Orleans are, and then those things can pivot in 6 to 12 months.
And I think social media is a great way to connect to the youth. And on top of having that connection to the youth, we can use it in order to promote
Yeah.
some of the positive things that we're doing. I think it's just one of those essential tools in today's market now. Like I said, I stand by the grassroots, and I think it's important to have it as well, but to couple them both, and you both are that.
A good communications plan does that, right? Multiple layers. Okay, so actually we're gonna have a break and then executive session, I believe, correct? Yes? Okay, so I'm gonna who's next on board?
So
Is that you, Chairman?
For public comments. Do we have any public comments?
No public comments at this time.
All right, seeing no public comments, y'all want to jump into, can somebody make a
I move that we go into executive session.
Second.
move a second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
In the executive session. But I didn't realize that IDB